Have you ever sat across from someone, shared something personal, something real, and walked away feeling smaller? Not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't? A glance that lingers too long, a joke that hits too deep, a silence that says more than words ever could. That's not awkwardness. That's not just a bad day. Sometimes that's hate in disguise. See, the people who resent you the most rarely raise their voice. They don't shout. They don't fight. They withdraw. They smile. They quietly erase you from the room while pretending everything is fine. And if you're not careful, you'll start blaming yourself for the discomfort you feel. You'll doubt your instincts. You'll think, maybe I'm overreacting. You're not. Stoic philosophy teaches us to observe before reacting, to trust the wisdom of discomfort, and to protect our peace from subtle attacks that wear polite faces. This video will expose the quiet ways hidden resentment shows up, through passive aggression, fake concern, and emotional sabotage. You won't just learn to spot it, you'll learn how to respond with clarity and dignity. If you've ever felt something was off but couldn't explain it, this is for you. Subscribe now and drop C clearly in the comments if you're ready to stop explaining your worth and start defending it with silence, strength, and self-respect. Let's begin. 1. Subtle disrespect is still disrespect. You don't need to be yelled at to be disrespected. Sometimes the deepest cuts are delivered without volume, without even a change in tone. You walk away from a conversation feeling unsettled, maybe even slightly embarrassed, and you can't quite explain why. There were no insults, no loud confrontations, but there were signals. They spoke over you. They dismissed your thoughts mid-sentence. They chuckled just a bit too long after a sarcastic remark about something you cared about. And the worst part? You start asking yourself if you're overreacting. That's the trap. That's the hidden manipulation. The most dangerous form of emotional sabotage is the one that gets you to doubt your right to feel. This happens more often than people realize. A friend who's all smiles in public but always changes the subject when you talk about your progress. A coworker who never lets you finish a sentence. A family member who consistently turns your serious concern into a joke. Each moment on its own seems harmless, but they add up. And eventually, you start shrinking, not because anyone told you to, but because the space you're given makes it harder to breathe. Stoicism teaches that we must observe these moments with sharp clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people will behave as they choose, but his response remains his own. The power lies in perception, and perception must be trained to see what's real, not what's convenient. Subtle disrespect is often more harmful than open conflict because it is invisible to outsiders, and even to the person experiencing it, until it's too late. It wears the mask of just a joke, just a habit, just how they are. But underneath is a message repeated often enough that your mind begins to believe it. You don't matter here. And once that message settles, emotional erosion begins. This is how hidden resentment operates. It never slams the door. It leaves it slightly ajar, just enough for you to wonder if you're imagining things. But you're not. When someone constantly forgets your contributions, dismisses your ideas, or interrupts your voice, that's not poor communication. That's an intentional disregard, a subtle form of dominance rooted in their own insecurity. People who cannot feel significant on their own often find twisted comfort in making others feel small. Their weapon is not noise, it's dismissal. And their power comes from your hesitation to name what's happening. So you begin to retreat without being pushed. You edit your sentences, downplay your emotions, and slowly stop bringing things up at all. That's when their tactic succeeds, because the moment you start questioning your presence, they no longer have to do the work of diminishing you. You do it yourself. But the Stoic does not accept this. The Stoic does not fight with rage, but he does not ignore the insult either. He sees it, he names it, and most importantly, he refuses to accept it as truth. Your peace is not preserved by tolerating repeated passive aggression. It's preserved by recognizing the difference between humility and self-erasure. Just because someone's words aren't loud doesn't mean their message is soft. Sometimes the most violent thing a person can say is nothing at all, especially when they say it often, especially when they say it right after you open your heart. So the answer is not confrontation, it's clarity. You don't need to yell, you don't need to make a scene, but you do need to stop pretending the tension you feel is all in your head. That feeling, tight in your chest, heavy in your gut, is your wisdom speaking. Don't dismiss it, respect it. Let it guide you. Set boundaries not out of bitterness, but because emotional self-respect is not a luxury, it is a daily discipline. Disrespect that hides behind silence is still disrespect. And if you continue to allow it, it becomes part of your reality. But the moment you name it for what it is, it loses its grip. What they whisper with passive cruelty, you answer with inner strength. Let them speak softly. You walk away louder. 2. Concern can be control in disguise. There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't yell, doesn't punish, doesn't even look hostile. It smiles, it checks in, it asks how you're doing, but not out of care, out of calculation. You've probably encountered someone like this. They say they just want the best for you, that they're only trying to help. But every time you walk away from them, you feel smaller, less certain, a bit more unsure about your own decisions. Their words sound soft, but something inside you contracts. And that feeling, that tightening in your gut, is not guilt. It's recognition. Because real support doesn't make you doubt yourself more than you already do. It usually starts innocently. A longtime friend, an older sibling, a partner who always asks, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Or "Have you thought this through?" And at first it sounds like wisdom, like someone looking out for you. But over time, you notice a pattern. They never celebrate your choices. They never truly listen without adding a disclaimer, a warning, a subtle hint that you're still not ready. When you succeed, they're quiet. When you falter, they're quick to say they saw it coming. It's not guidance. It's surveillance. Their concern is a disguise, and behind it is the need to keep you dependent, to make you seek their approval before moving. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when we stop expecting from others what they cannot give freely. And that's exactly what's missing in these interactions. Freedom. The freedom to speak without being analyzed, to decide without being second-guessed, to grow without being guilted. When someone uses concern as a leash, they are not protecting you, they are containing you. And the danger is subtle, because their tone stays calm, their words appear supportive, and their image to others remains generous. But you feel the weight. You feel the scrutiny disguised as interest, the veiled judgment hiding in kind questions. That's not care, that's control. Stoicism teaches us to separate appearances from truth. Just because someone sounds thoughtful doesn't mean they are aligned with your peace. And if every interaction leaves you doubting your worth or your capability, that's not emotional support. That's a quiet strategy to keep you small. It often stems from their own fear. People who are insecure in their own path struggle to allow others to move freely. Your independence threatens their illusion of superiority. So instead of celebrating you, they clip your wings with polite warnings and backhanded advice. The impact of this behavior is profound. You start asking for permission you don't need. You delay action because you're afraid of disappointing someone who never truly believed in you. You silence your instinct and outsource your decision-making to someone who only shows up when they can criticize the outcome. Over time, your voice dulls, your inner compass spins. You forget how to trust yourself without asking someone else first. But you were not born to play a role in someone else's comfort script. You are not here to edit your truth to match their fears. The Stoic response is not rebellion, it's clarity. You don't need to fight them or prove yourself or beg for understanding. You only need to reclaim the space they quietly took. That begins when you stop explaining your dreams to those who only listen to reshape them. It begins when you stop apologizing for trusting yourself. And it begins when you recognize that emotional control dressed up as concern is still control. So the next time someone checks in, not to support but to undermine, pause. Listen not just to their words, but to what your body feels after the conversation. If you leave more confused than empowered, that's your signal. Walk away, not with anger, but with awareness. Not to hurt them, but to heal you. Because no one who truly loves you will require you to shrink to feel safe. And no concern that costs you your clarity is worth keeping in your life. Let them keep their script. You are no longer playing that role. You've outgrown it. 3. Neglect during your vulnerable moments speaks volumes. There's something deeply revealing about who shows up when you're no longer shining. It's easy to find people who want to be around when the drinks are flowing, when the news is good, when the spotlight hits just right. But when life dims, when your voice trembles, when you're not at your best, that's when the truth steps forward or disappears. You start to see clearly not through celebration, but through silence. You begin to learn that absence is not always accidental. Sometimes it's deliberate. Sometimes it's the quietest form of rejection. And no, it doesn't scream or accuse. It simply withholds what you once assumed was unconditional presence. Take someone like Alex. He was always there for his friends, first to arrive on birthdays, present during their losses, cheerful in their victories. And when his own moment of need arrived, when he went through a serious surgery, he expected nothing grand. Not a parade, just a message, a call, a gesture of care. But what he received was nothing. Days passed, then weeks. And when he finally asked why, one of his closest friends simply said, "I figured you had enough support." That sentence stayed with him longer than the recovery ever did. Because it wasn't just thoughtless, it was revealing. Behind that casual dismissal was a kind of emotional distance that couldn't be patched up with later apologies. Seneca wrote that attention is a form of respect, and in moments of vulnerability, that truth cuts deep. When someone consistently withdraws from you the moment you are no longer strong, what they're saying is, "I liked you better when you didn't need me." And that's not friendship. That's conditional proximity. The Stoics never taught us to expect perfection from others. They warned us instead to pay attention to patterns, not words, not occasional gestures, but the repeated rhythms of someone's behavior, because behavior always tells the truth that words are too polite to say. Neglect, especially during times of need, is not neutral. It's a message, a cold one. It says, "Your pain is inconvenient. Your struggle makes me uncomfortable. Your presence is only valuable when it comes with celebration." And when you internalize that enough, you begin to edit yourself, even in your weakest moments. You stop asking for help. You stop reaching out. You try to be endlessly self-sufficient, not out of pride, but out of quiet grief, because you've learned that your needs cost too much in the economy of conditional connection. But that is not a strength. That is self-erasure born from emotional disappointment. And if left unchecked, it leads to deeper wounds. You start mistaking silence for maturity. You start thinking that tolerating emotional absence is a virtue. It's not. The Stoics never said to suffer in silence. They said to suffer with awareness, to know what is yours to carry and what is not. And someone else's failure to show up for you when it truly matters is not your burden. It's their reflection. If someone repeatedly disappears in the moments that define you, understand, that is who they are, not who they used to be, not who you hope they'll become. Their absence is their choice. Your response is your power. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to scream into their silence. What you need is to protect your peace from further erosion. You need to step back, not out of bitterness, but out of deep self-respect. Because if someone cannot stand next to you when your voice shakes, they have not earned the right to cheer when you finally roar. Real connection isn't measured by who celebrates you. It's measured by who stays when you have nothing to give. So when neglect comes wrapped in politeness or excused by busyness, don't make room for it. Call it what it is, emotional avoidance, and walk calmly, quietly, powerfully toward people who won't vanish when the light fades. Because the ones who love your joy but reject your pain are not your people. They are just spectators. And your life was never meant to be a show. 4. Passive withdrawal is emotional sabotage. Not every person who walks away does it with footsteps. Some stay right next to you, smiling, nodding, saying all the right things, but they've already left the relationship in spirit. And the sabotage begins, not with open criticism, but with quiet indifference. You share something meaningful, a small win, a creative idea, a hard-earned breakthrough, and what you meet is not support, but silence. A half smile, a flat response. Or worse, a dismissive joke like, "Took you long enough," delivered just soft enough to deny intention, but sharp enough to make you question yourself. That's not playfulness. That's emotional sabotage dressed as humor. And over time, it starts to work. This kind of subtle withdrawal is hard to name because it doesn't announce itself. There's no argument, no dramatic exit, just a slow erosion of warmth, a chilling absence of enthusiasm, a hollow reaction where once there was celebration. You start to notice that they only show up fully when you're struggling, never when you're rising. They offer sympathy for your wounds, but have no applause for your growth. And the message becomes clear. Your pain is safe, your power is threatening. This isn't just passive behavior. It's calculated disengagement, designed to keep you in a space where they feel superior, never overshadowed. Marcus Aurelius taught that it's not the behavior of others that wounds us, but our interpretation of it. Still, wisdom does not mean blindness. You must see the pattern. When someone consistently meets your joy with distance, your progress with detachment, that's not emotional neutrality. It's resentment wearing a polite mask. It comes not from strength, but from deep insecurity. They need you to stay small because your growth reflects their stagnation. And if they can't feel big beside you, they will quietly try to make you shrink. The damage, however, is anything but quiet. At first, you try harder to earn their approval. You tone yourself down. You stop sharing good news. You lower your volume so they'll stay comfortable. And then you begin to wonder if your accomplishments were ever worth mentioning at all. That's how the sabotage succeeds. It convinces you to do the silencing for them. It convinces you to step back just enough, so they don't have to feel left behind. But Stoic philosophy doesn't ask us to dull our light to make others feel better. It calls us to shine with dignity, regardless of whether we can handle the brightness. True companionship is revealed not in moments of hardship, but in moments of triumph. A real ally doesn't flinch when you grow. They grow with you. And if someone begins to pull away every time you move forward, then what they offered was never support. It was silent competition. Don't let their withdrawal define your direction. Don't adjust your joy to fit into their emotional discomfort. Your growth is not arrogance. Your success is not an attack. It's a natural unfolding of your effort, your discipline, your vision, and no one should make you feel guilty for becoming more. If their approval depends on your suffering, you don't need it. If their affection fades when you thrive, it was never love. It was dependency dressed as care. The Stoic doesn't respond with bitterness. He doesn't chase. He observes. He sees clearly who claps when no one else is watching. He sees who listens when he speaks his dreams aloud. And he pays attention to those who fall silent when he finally steps into his power. Those silences are not harmless. They are confessions. They reveal the envy, the comparison, the quiet need for control. And once seen, they must be met, not with confrontation, but with calm distance. Because you were not made to fit inside the small world someone else built to feel big. You were made to expand, to build, to thrive. Let them fall silent. Let them withdraw. But you keep going. And if your light casts a shadow on someone else's insecurity, that is not your fault to fix. It's their work to do. Your only task is to never again apologize for rising. 5. Exclusion hurts more than insults. Sometimes the sharpest pain doesn't come from words said. It comes from the silence that surrounds what's left unsaid. You don't always bleed from betrayal. Sometimes you just find yourself staring at a photo of people you thought were close, laughing, celebrating, living, and you're not there. No explanation, no warning, no invitation. The first time, you tell yourself it was an oversight. The second, you feel a sting. The third, you stop pretending. Because by then, it's no longer a mistake. It's a message. An exclusion, especially when repeated, cuts deeper than any insult ever could, because it doesn't just question your presence in the group. It questions your place in the world. We all want to belong. That desire is rooted deep in the human psyche. But what happens when you realize that the belonging you thought you had was conditional? That your absence doesn't raise a question? That no one even noticed you were gone? It starts to eat at your sense of identity. Marcus Aurelius once reflected that while we cherish ourselves more than anyone else, we often care more about others' opinions than our own inner truth. And nowhere is that contradiction more painful than in the quiet sting of being left out, especially by those who once claimed to care. Exclusion isn't always aggressive. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't confront you directly. It simply removes you quietly, like erasing a line from a page. And because there's no dramatic event to point to, you begin to doubt your own feelings. You think maybe you're being sensitive. Maybe they didn't mean anything by it. but your instincts know better. The discomfort isn't paranoia. It's perception, because people know exactly who they invite and exactly who they leave out. Repeated exclusion is a form of passive aggression. It's a tactic used by those who want to assert emotional dominance without appearing confrontational. It says, without a word, you're not one of us. And the longer you stay silent, the more damage it does. Not just to your trust in them, but to your trust in yourself. You start questioning your worth. You wonder what you did wrong, how you could be more likable, more useful, more whatever it takes to get back in the room. But the Stoic response is not to chase inclusion. It's to return to clarity. Because needing validation from those who actively erase you is a quiet form of self-betrayal. And the longer you tolerate it, the more you disconnect from your own center. You bend to fit into a space that's shrinking around you, and in doing so, you lose the shape of who you are. Exclusion is especially brutal because it preys on the invisible wounds, the ones that don't show, the ones that can't be explained in a single sentence. But Stoicism offers an antidote to that invisible suffering. It doesn't demand you confront the group. It doesn't ask you to make a scene. It simply asks you to observe, calmly, honestly, and choose again. Choose to walk where you are seen, not where you are tolerated. Choose to stand where your presence doesn't require constant justification. The right people don't forget you. They don't need to be reminded to include you. They just do. So when you find yourself on the outside of a circle that used to welcome you, don't beg to be let back in. That door has already spoken. And what it said was this: you were only ever accepted under conditions that served them, not you. Your job is not to knock louder, it's to ask why you ever knocked at all. Because a real connection doesn't require proof. It doesn't need you to be useful. It doesn't expire when your season changes. It stays. Let their silence be their statement. Let your clarity be your answer. And above all, never mistake exclusion for miscommunication when it's been patterned and precise. Walk away, not to make a point, but to preserve your peace. Because you don't need to fight for your place among people who've already decided you don't belong. What you need is to stop making yourself small enough to fit into rooms that can't hold the fullness of who you are. 6. Insecurity-based jokes are not harmless. There's a fine line between humor and humiliation, and the people who cross it often hide behind the phrase, "I was just joking." But when a joke keeps hitting the same nerve, when it targets a vulnerability you once shared in trust, it stops being funny. It becomes a weapon. And what makes it dangerous is how it masquerades as harmless play. You laugh to keep things light, to not look sensitive, to avoid ruining the moment. But deep down, something cracks a little more each time. That kind of joke doesn't build a connection. It erodes dignity. Slowly, quietly, intentionally. Imagine sitting at a dinner table and hearing someone bring up a failure from your past, the kind you confided in them during a private conversation. They laugh, others laugh, and you force a smile because walking out would make it awkward. It's not just the joke that hurts, it's the betrayal embedded in it. They took something fragile and made it public for their own moment of wit. And when you confront it, the response is predictable. You're too sensitive. That phrase is designed to disarm you, to flip the blame, to make you second-guess your own emotional boundaries. Epictetus said it's not the events themselves that disturb us, but the meanings we attach to them. But Stoic wisdom also teaches discernment. And when the same person keeps choosing the same sore spot, it's not accidental, it's strategic. They're not unaware, they're aiming. What they want is control, not connection. By turning your insecurities into punchlines, they assert subtle dominance. They laugh at you while expecting you to stay silent. And if you internalize the shame, they win without ever raising their voice. This tactic often comes from deeply insecure people. They feel irrelevant in their own life, so they seek power by reducing others. When your growth threatens them, they remind you of your past. When your confidence grows, they poke holes in it. They don't need to scream to be cruel. They just need to be consistent. Over time, the result is emotional self-censorship. You start speaking less. You filter yourself around them. You stop bringing your full self to the table, not because you're weak, but because you're tired of flinching every time your truth becomes their material. But this isn't a strength, it's survival. And the Stoic path was never about mere survival. It's about clarity. It's about knowing when something that looks like camaraderie is actually quiet cruel. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of you they can't treat with respect. You don't need to prove your resilience by enduring disrespect masked as humor. And you certainly don't need to explain your pain to someone who keeps stepping on it just to get a laugh. You don't have to yell. You don't have to make a scene. But you do have to decide. Will you keep laughing at things that hurt you just to maintain the illusion of peace? Or will you quietly step away, knowing that silence can also be a boundary? Stoicism doesn't ask you to be cold. It asks you to be wise. If a person repeatedly uses your past to reduce your present, that's not friendship. That's emotional sabotage. And the longer you stay in it, the more you risk normalizing that dynamic. So if the laughter dies in your chest while everyone else seems to enjoy the moment, listen to that. It's your clarity speaking, and clarity demands action. Sometimes that means speaking up and letting them know the joke isn't welcome. Sometimes it means choosing a different company, but always it means choosing yourself. Because the moment you stop justifying pain in the name of harmony, you reclaim your dignity. And when you do, their jokes won't land. Not because they stopped trying, but because you're no longer standing in the line of fire pretending it's love. 7. Repeated micro-wounds break the spirit. It's not always the loud betrayal that breaks you. More often, it's the small, repeated slights, the ones that don't leave visible scars but slowly eat away at your self-worth. You don't collapse overnight, you erode over time. It starts with a missed moment, a forgotten reply, an idea ignored until someone else repeats it. Then it happens again and again. And one day you find yourself hesitating to speak, shrinking in rooms you once stood tall in, unsure if your presence matters at all. You're not angry, you're just fading. This kind of damage is easy to dismiss by others and by yourself. You tell yourself you're overthinking it. You convince yourself they didn't mean anything by it, but your spirit knows the truth. These aren't accidents. They are micro-wounds, subtle, consistent acts of disregard that build on top of one another until your confidence starts to crack. A partner who constantly interrupts your stories. A friend who never follows through on what they say. A colleague who praises your idea only after it's been rephrased by someone else. It doesn't feel like cruelty, but it functions like it. It makes you question your value. And that is how you begin to vanish, not from the world, but from your own identity. Marcus Aurelius once warned that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But thoughts are shaped by patterns. And when the people around you repeatedly diminish you, it's not just the pattern of their behavior that matters. It's the pattern of what you start to believe. You stop expecting respect. You stop asking to be heard. You stop showing up fully, not because you've changed, but because you've learned what happens when you do. This is how emotional sabotage works. Not with a single strike, but with accumulation. The Stoics didn't ask us to ignore pain. They asked us to name it clearly. And this kind of subtle erosion is pain. It is the silent weight of being overlooked, minimized, and emotionally sidelined. Over time, it conditions you to tolerate less than you deserve. You adapt to the dysfunction, normalize the disrespect, and redefine your boundaries, not by strength, but by what you've been taught to accept. But clarity must interrupt that cycle. You don't need a breakdown to justify a boundary. You don't need one final offense to prove you've had enough. The wisdom is in recognizing the pattern early and refusing to let it rewrite who you are. Because if you stay long enough in any space where you are constantly diminished, the most dangerous thing that happens is not what they do to you. It's what you begin to do to yourself. You dull your voice, you minimize your joy. You hold back your truth because you've learned that being fully you always comes with a cost. And that's where your choice begins. Do you stay and keep collecting wounds, hoping they'll one day notice what they've done? Or do you leave, not out of rage, but out of self-respect? The Stoic doesn't seek revenge. He seeks alignment. He watches the evidence, not the excuses. He steps back when a space no longer reflects who he chooses to be. That's not weakness. That's a strength. Because endurance without awareness is not virtue. It's self-abandonment. So if someone repeatedly chips away at your confidence, not with harsh words but with consistent disregard. Let your silence turn into distance. Let your presence become a choice, not a reaction. You don't have to explain the 1,000 cuts. You only have to recognize that they happened, and then, with calm clarity, walk away. Not to teach them a lesson, but to give yourself permission to heal. You don't need to be destroyed to decide. You only need to remember, what you tolerate daily becomes the shape of your life. And you were never meant to live small just to survive someone else's neglect. You were meant to see clearly, speak wisely, and protect the one thing no one else will ever value for you until you do, your spirit. Let that be the reason you stop enduring. Let that be the reason you choose peace, not proof. Hatred doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it hides in the calm tone, the polite silence, the carefully crafted joke that wounds just deep enough. The danger isn't how quiet it can be, how easily we explain it away as stress, habit, or personality. But if someone's behavior repeatedly drains your emotional energy, dismisses your voice, or erodes your self-respect, that's not harmless. It's subtle sabotage, and it leaves long-term damage if left unchecked. The Stoic path is not about reacting in anger. It's about seeing clearly and choosing strength through emotional discipline. When someone shows you who they are, through exclusion, passive aggression, or emotional manipulation, you don't need to argue. You need to protect your peace. You're not overreacting by choosing boundaries. You're responding with clarity. Remember, the silent treatment, hidden resentment, and toxic humor are not signs of love. They're signs of control. And your job is not to tolerate it. It's to recognize it and walk away when needed. If this message spoke to your experience, share your story in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. And if you're ready to reclaim your peace with quiet strength, like the video and subscribe for more Stoic clarity every week.